Okay, we'll open in prayer. If you'll join me, we'll begin in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will. All I have and call my own, you have given all to me. To you, Lord, I return it. Everything is yours. Do with it what you will. Give me only your love and your grace. That is enough for me. Amen. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. We have two objectives today. By the end of class today, you should be able to do these two things. If by the end of class you cannot do these two things, then I have failed you as a teacher. I'll do my best. Please do your best. Would somebody like to read number 1, please? Thank you, Harry.
Identify the issues that made the politics of the 1790s so diverse.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the condition of the United States in the early days of the Republic, and it was a very divisive time. If you guys think that politics is ugly today in 2019, then you have no idea how ugly it was in the early days of the country. This was some of the in-your-face, it's personal kind of politics. And the crazy thing is that these guys all knew each other. They were all actual colleagues and sometimes friends and sometimes former friends. It was not only political, it was personal. And would somebody like to read number 2, please? Nika Shank.
Explain how the competing views of freedom and global events promoted the political divisions of the 1790s.
Yes, so what's kind of like the ongoing Foner story about the views of freedom and, the Give Me Liberty textbook, and that it's all about these competing views of liberty and freedom. We'll talk about how that fits into the bigger narrative of early America and getting established and the troubles along the way. So when you go home tonight and your parents say, "What did you learn in school today?" you don't have to look at them and say, "Nothing," like you've been saying since you were 8. Instead, you could say, "Well, Mother, well, Father, shall we identify the issues that made the politics of the 1790s so divisive?" And they'll say, "Why, yes, child, that'll make a thrilling dinner time conversation. You'll have something to talk about. How exciting will that be? Huh?"
Very exciting.
Very exciting indeed. All right, we are in our paper notes. You may close your laptops. They will not help you. And we'll begin in Roman numeral number 1. The still in this picture, the main part of the picture here is John Adams and George Washington on Inauguration Day. Washington's got a sword at his side, the sword of leadership, even though he's dressed like a civilian. He surrendered his command of the military to become the first president and is a civilian. This still comes to us from an HBO miniseries called John Adams, based on the McCullough biography, and it's brilliant. You should watch it. If you just want to Harry, you good?
Yeah, I'm just talking about how good John Adams is.
It's good. Paul Giamatti in his best role ever as John Adams. This is the series that made me realize that John Adams and I are the same person. We are exactly the same person. For all of our faults and all of our the good things and the bad. What's that?
Actually, he's just
His hairline's insane.
Yeah, so this is kind of like the transition era of the powdered wigs. Yeah. Adams did not have good hair anyway. But kind of the last days of the powdered wigs. Yeah, Jimmy?
If Washington surrendered his leadership over the army, then why is the president the commander-in-chief?
Because we have civilian control of the military. Washington is also the only president to actually put his uniform back on and go back into battle. We'll talk about that today. But let's begin in Roman numeral number 1. In 1788, so we have a new government. We have start of a new country. Washington is elected president. Washington is not a member of a political party. George doesn't party. He is of neither party. He actually thinks that political parties are a problem, and so he refuses to be a member of either one. We'll talk about the emerging parties here soon. But there is the early versions of a political party, it's more of like a coalition or an alliance. That's the Federalist Party. And they're very successful in 1788. And they choose George Washington as president and John Adams as vice president. The way it worked was that every elector of the Electoral College got 2 votes. And you could put down, whoever you wanted to be president. George Washington was the unanimous pick for president. He is the only person to be elected unanimously, and he was. John Adams was a person of a much lesser stature, besides like just height, of personality. He was a lesser man. He was an attorney. John Adams was the loudest and most insistent voice of the Revolution. He's the guy that picks Jefferson to write the Declaration of Independence. Like an attorney, John Adams is always comfortable in the conflict. He's comfortable in the fight and the argument. And really becomes a man of distinction at the time of the Revolution, and the Electoral College names him to be the vice president. Yeah?
Okay, so the Electoral College was made so you can if they didn't trust the citizens to vote right, so they can kind of vote against it and put their votes in. Can you still do that today?
Yeah, yes, it doesn't happen much, but even today there are what they call faithless electors, where members of the Electoral College break with their state decision and vote elsewise.
What happens if that happens? Is that their vote changes the entire state?
It's the real vote. So usually, Kansas has 6 votes in the Electoral College. Usually what would happen is that one person would break, and 5 would go one way and 1 would go the other. That's pretty, if there are going to be faithless electors, and there are, that's usually how it goes. Yes, Fancy?
Isn't it the person who got second place to be the vice president?
That's correct. Yeah, but so Washington's unanimous, and then they basically just pick Adams to come out of the gate as vice president. The Constitution gave the president the power to appoint major officials, which is still a power the president has today. It's to go fill the important jobs, with the consent of the Senate. So the Senate has to agree to those. And Washington picks his first cabinet. His first cabinet is made out of 4 people. Thomas Jefferson was the Secretary of State. Thomas Jefferson, a Virginian. He had, during the Revolution, been the ambassador to France. Thomas Jefferson is a pretty interesting guy. He is a poet. He has a poet's heart. He's an introvert. He would rather stay back and write papers than be the center of attention. He's actually a perfect person to be a diplomat because he has lived in Europe. He doesn't need to be the center of attention, at least in this era, doesn't need to be the center of attention. He's happy to just make his decisions and move. So Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of State. The job of the Secretary of State is to be the chief diplomat. You also have Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton names him to be the first Secretary of the Treasury. Hamilton's backstory is pretty fascinating. He grew up on an island in the Caribbean. And where he learned early bookkeeping. We did not accounting like the way you're used to it today, but he would handle trade for ships that would come into port, and he was used to working in international currencies and keeping accounting books straight, and he had a real sophisticated understanding of international finance and how money moves. When he immigrated to America, he joined the Revolution, fought under Washington's command, ended up eventually rising up to be Washington's right-hand man, and he's a natural pick to be the Secretary of Treasury. 2 other people in here of lesser importance today. Henry Knox, of whom Fort Knox is named, names him Secretary of War, and Edmund Randolph names him to be the Attorney General. Radcliffe, that's it. Names Radcliffe to be the Attorney General or the head cop. But let's focus on Hamilton, the $10 founding father. As secretary, Fancy, you're going to have to get it together, okay? I'm serious, okay? As Secretary of Treasury, Hamilton's long-range goal was to make the United States economically viable and to establish power in the world. Of the first political party, the Federalists, Hamilton becomes the loudest and most important voice. Adams would be their most important electoral achievement, at least of the early party, because Adams would become vice president, but Hamilton is definitely the heart of the movement. So his work was pretty controversial, particularly because the Federalists are comfortable with the idea of a strong central government. They're comfortable with the idea that, like, power gets power and is not in the hands of so many people. It's in the hands of a few kind of elite people with, like, governing ability. There's another side to this we'll talk about here in a minute, but that's kind of the idea of the Federalists' idea. The idea of the Federalist Party. And it's controversial because they just fought a revolution that a government got too powerful, and this sounds like Hamilton wants to set up the same thing again. But Hamilton devised this idea where he says the revolution was really expensive, and the way that we paid for it was by going into debt. And we have all of these states that owe money to their people who bought war bonds, to international powers when they borrowed money from other countries. And Hamilton says that all the states hold the debt, you know? I mean, like New York has debt and Pennsylvania has debt, and it's all war debt. And that kind of made sense in the Articles of the Confederation, where all of the states were like their own little individual countries. That kind of made sense then. But we don't have the Articles anymore. We have the Constitution, and we have one country. Those states shouldn't be managing that debt for the whole country anymore. And so Hamilton comes up with this plan where the federal government will assume the debts of the states and guarantee them and begin the plan to pay them off. Hamilton creates our first national debt. The however many trillions of dollars that we are in today, it's not the same, like we've paid it off a couple of times since Hamilton, but like that big pool of debt, Hamilton's kind of like the founding father of the American debt. Also, but Hamilton realizes that how do we want to say this? If Cohen loans me $100, I appreciate it, thank you. It's in Cohen's best interest that I keep my job so I can go pay him back. Cohen wouldn't want to see me ruined or destroyed. That would be bad for Cohen. Of course it's bad for me, but it would be bad for Cohen, because that means he's never going to get paid back. Hamilton realizes in the early days of the country that one of the ways that we can assure our stability as a nation in the eyes of the rest of the world is if we kind of owe the rest of the world some money. It's kind of a backwards way of saying it, but there's some early legitimacy by starting out in a national debt. In the Hamilton plan, like, nobody's thinking like this. Nobody's thinking like this. But it's kind of like this early stroke of an idea. So he issues, he wants to create a permanent national debt which would be owned by not necessarily foreign powers, but by wealthy American powers. So then, Cohen owns my debt. If Cohen then, he's a creditor, and maybe he's not the only one. Maybe say there's other like really powerful and important families that all kind of like own this debt collectively. They own the debt of Walberica. Then Cohen's not going to threaten the future of the country because, you know, he's in it, right? So that's kind of the idea. There was a different proposal. There was a different proposal from Hamilton's one-time friend, James Madison. Madison had once written with Hamilton, co-written the Federalist Papers to help set up the Constitution. Madison, the father of the Constitution, integral in all of the debates of founding the country. They were at one time on the same side. Madison at some point changes his position where he no longer wants a super strong central government, but takes a different position with a more diversified set of powers through all the states. Madison says, if we have all of these debts, what you do is not pay them off by centralizing a national debt. You give tax relief to the states who are in debt, to the people who are in debt, and let them pay them off. Like, you find ways to pay off this debt naturally rather than assume it and centralize it. The House rejected Madison's proposal for helping shopkeepers and farmers and soldiers who were the original owners of the war debt, the Confederation securities, and instead Congress approved Hamilton's proposal that the nation adopt an assumption plan to assume the debts of the states. When Congress becomes Team Hamilton, all of a sudden, all of the Cohens of the world are super excited because they're going to get all of their debts paid off. But Cohen can also go and sell his portion of the debt to other people, and he would sell it to Darien, and so then Darien becomes a speculator. There's this huge, all of a sudden, boom in the secondary market and speculative market because the Hamilton plan is going to pay off all of these things. So it sets off this insider trading of rich people buying the debts of rich people. Hamilton agreed to reimburse the states that had already paid off a lot of their war debt. So if Georgia had already paid off its war debt, the Hamilton plan would also give Georgia kind of a perk for that, rather than just saying hey, you got paid and now you go walk. Go give them a bit of a payout. Hamilton believed that a unified national debt would create creditworthiness for the new country. He asked Congress to charter a bank, the Bank of the United States, the BUS, charter the bus, which would be owned partially by the national government and partially by private stockholders. So, if we wanted to start a bank, if Second Hour APUSH decided we wanted to start the first Bank of Waberica, we could pool all of our money together and then start deciding who we were going to loan it out to, because banks do their business in loans. So we would put all of our money together, everybody would put in our wealth, and we would jointly share in the ownership of that bank. We would have shares of the ownership, right? In this case, the Bank of the United States would be partially owned by the national government and partially owned by private stockholders, private shareholders who would invest in it. This is kind of the Hamilton model for the first Bank of the United States. Washington signed the bill to go create the law, although he immediately faces a constitutional challenge by his Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, and Madison, who I think at this point is the Speaker of the House and father of the Constitution. Right away, the Bank of the United States is controversial. And the opposite side says, wait, I've read the Constitution, and I have read the Constitution, and there's nothing in there that Congress can go start a bank. It's not in there. And so you can't just well, this seems like a good idea. That's not a power of government, and it's inappropriate to do so. So right away, this looks like the central government getting too much power, and here we go on the path towards tyranny. At Hamilton's insistence, as Secretary of Treasury, he insisted that a number of taxes be laid out. In one sense, to have a tariff. A tariff is a tax on imports. Today we use tariffs to manipulate world trade. Hamilton wanted to use tariffs basically as a revenue tariff to go make some tax money, to go pay the interest on this debt, and to keep the government expenses paid down. The other thing Hamilton insists on is an excise tax. That term may be new to you, an excise tax. The simplified version of an excise tax is that it's a sales tax on a particular thing. So if we were to all go to Quick Trip right now, we were all going to go get in the Thunder Bus and drive to Quick Trip, and we're all going to get a Slurpee and a piece of rolling meat. Taquito, whatever. I like the buffalo, probably chicken, tubular things. Those are my favorite.
It's not probably chicken. It looks like.
Presumably chicken. But if we would all go up there, we were to go up to our register, and everybody's got their cylindrical meat and a Slurpee, and we would all pay for those, and we would pay a certain amount of sales tax on that, right? Okay, now let's say I'm 18, I'm the only one that can do this, but let's say while I'm there, I'm also going to pick up a few packs of smokes. Okay? I know. There is on tobacco a specific tax on tobacco products. That specific tax on tobacco products is called an excise tax. It's there for two reasons. One, it raises money, and two, in this case, it makes cigarettes more expensive. It tries to price it out of the market. So people are like, man, I was going to buy some smokes, but golly, they're expensive, and so you don't buy some. That's the point of an excise tax. Yes, it raises tax money, and it also tries to discourage people from using the product. It's a way the government doesn't just outlaw tobacco. They just like punish your wallet for being an addict. Yeah.
Okay. So you know a country like loan out money to each other?
Yes.
And they're like all in debt pretty much?
Yes.
How are they loaning money if they owe money? How does that work?
Okay, this is a really good question, and I'm going to dodge it. And I'm going to say that as far as I can tell, government money is infinite. As far as I can tell. Yes, Harry.
So if they tried to make money off of like making cigarettes like super expensive, and then people didn't want to buy them, wouldn't that just not really work very well?
Yes, it's a poor model for the long-term tax collection. It's an excellent model if you actually want to discourage people from smoking cigarettes. It's actually very good at that, and smoking rates have dropped, so much so that when I graduated from high school, 40% of my senior class smoked. When you guys will graduate from college, or graduate from high school, you won't be able to name anybody who's basically a regular cigarette smoker. And then this is like in half a generation. Yeah.
But hasn't it just like transferred? Because like we can all name people who vape, for
Yeah,
example.
I know. That's true. Until they dump the excise tax on that or that. So, okay. So anyway, Hamilton says moderate tariffs for raising taxes, for raising revenue, and a tax on an excise tax, in particular, he says alcohol consumption. In particular on alcohol consumption, which at the time is basically a whiskey tax. That's the main type of alcohol. It wasn't only on whiskey, but that's kind of like the main alcohol consumed at the time. So Hamilton proposes these two approaches for tax collection. Tax producers of alcohol. So if by producing the distilleries to do so, then that like. The distilleries are against this. We'll talk more about it specifically in a couple of slides. Hamilton also proposes a standing army, a national army which won't go away. In the United States today, we have a standing army. We have an army whether or not we are at war. And there actually have been times in American history where we're not at war, although it seems like so long ago. Yeah, we're in a couple of wars right now.
SHAYS'.
So Shay's was his name. So Shay's is possessive. Shay's rebellion. Yeah, it probably is. So he proposes a national army. He says, you remember Shay's rebellion. You remember Daniel Shay's, where he got all mad about tax collection. We got all mad about tax collection. We had to go like put down the rebellion, and we had to like the governor of Massachusetts had to hire a private army real fast. Hamilton's like, this is not a good model. This is not a good model. We should have a standing army that we can put down problems with. This is also controversial because if you have a standing army, then you have to have ongoing taxes to go pay for it. And what's more, what do we use this army for? What would we used it for in Shay's rebellion? To go fight on Americans. All of this stuff feeds the Hamilton reputation that he's a big government elitist who wants to punish the little guy. All of this stuff sounds like, to Hamilton's detractors, as like, really, you want to raise our taxes, create a standing army, and create an unconstitutional bank, which will all only feed the pockets of already rich and powerful people. Like, all of this stuff sounds like Hamilton doesn't care at all about the little guy, and all of it is immediately controversial. So, let us introduce the opposition side. Alexander Hamilton becomes the loudest voice and most important leader of an early political party known as the Federalists. So he's a Federalist political party. We call this the first party system. It is not organized the way we think of political parties today. It's more of a coalition or an alliance. It's not really like political parties like we have today, but they're representing this position. On the other side, you have a group that's led by Thomas Jefferson. This is confusing. Jefferson called himself a Republican. The people who wanted to insult Jefferson called him a Democrat. People also called this party the Democratic Republican Party, or the Jeffersonian Democratic Republican Party. All of them are the same political party, and they are not the predecessors of either the Republican or the Democratic Party today. So this is all kind of confusing. But the other side is Jefferson. Now, we've talked a little bit about Jefferson. I want to talk for a minute about the man of Jefferson. Jefferson, or his politics anyway. Jefferson is kind of the opposite of Hamilton. He doesn't believe in a strong central government. Jefferson is a planter. He has a tobacco plantation. He thinks of himself as a farmer. He imagines a future America not as an international country of trade and commerce, but as a place that would grow wheat and go sell it, and people would live on their farms. And he imagined this agrarian ideal where people have small families living on small farms and just kind of enjoying a quiet life that doesn't rival each other or try to jockey for position in the world. He says this is what freedom is. It's not the freedom to oppress your neighbors. It's the freedom to just kind of do your thing. And that's very much the Jefferson ideal. It's also totally like what an introvert would come up with if they imagine their idea. I live on a farm. I don't talk to my neighbors. I have cows. It's kind of like, and Jefferson is totally an introvert. He has a poet's heart. Hamilton is not an introvert. Hamilton is an extrovert. He's a rabble-rouser. He's from New York. There's no farms in Hamilton's world. He imagines international trade and commerce and big dollars, and it looks pretty great. So these two are opposites of each other. And right away, the Federalists, who tend to be in the North, they support the Hamiltonian plan. The Republicans or the Democrats, the Democratic Republicans or the Jeffersonian Democratic Republicans, tend to be in the South, and they generally support the Jeffersonian ideal. And it kind of looks like Jefferson's the early winner. We established our country, and in the 1790s, Europe descends into war. By 1793, France is in its full-on revolution. And the revolution is spilled beyond the borders of France. Okay, so the French Revolution is all about like, get rid of our king. And then it goes to, get rid of everybody that sounds like they like kings. And then it goes to, let's get rid of all the kings. And every monarchy on earth gets challenged by eventually Napoleon, who's totally not a monarch. He's an emperor. There's a big difference. And so, right away, Europe falls into falls into war, and they're too busy shooting at each other or running from the guillotine to go plant crops. And the U.S. is an agrarian nation that begins exporting its crops to Europe. And right away, it looks like the Jefferson model is going to be the winner. Jefferson believed in social improvement. He's very much a man of the Enlightenment. He disliked class divisions and corruption. Thank you. Hamilton basically says, like, our future is with Great Britain in business. And the Jeffersonians are like, we don't like Britain, remember? Weren't you paying attention with that? We're Team France on this one. And our future lies in the West, not with, back in the old world across the ocean. Hamilton argued that the general welfare clause of the Constitution, that the Constitution promotes the general welfare. Hamilton said, all of this stuff, if you actually want our country to succeed, you need the central bank, you need the tax plan, you need the standing army. This is how you promote the general welfare. Jefferson said, no, none of these things are in the Constitution. The government can only exercise powers specifically listed in that Constitution. He has a point here. That is true. Madison knew it too. Madison and Jefferson are like buddies. Jefferson would become kind of the mentor for Madison. A lot of these guys kind of mentored each other. Washington mentored Hamilton. John Adams mentored Jefferson, who turned around and mentored Madison. Like these guys sort of like came of age about the same time in the same cohort. Jefferson does have a point. First Bank of the United States is not in the Constitution. At first, opposition to Hamilton was almost entirely from the South. Jefferson, when we passed the plan, when we passed the excise tax, when we passed the First Bank of the United States, all of that stuff is hammered out at a deal literally in George Washington's dining room at his dinner table, where he puts these three people together. Congress had given Washington the duty to go pick the place for the Capitol. He had been a surveyor as a young man. As a general, he understood landscapes and how people move, and Congress told Washington, go pick out a place for a Capitol. And he's like, sweet, I love this. These two settle down, and the only reason that the bank gets passed is because Hamilton proposes a deal to Jefferson. Jefferson, who had been Secretary of State, Jefferson, who had been operating in our first capital in Philadelphia, he hated Philadelphia. He hated it. Jefferson, look, it's too big, it's too busy, there's too much going on there. He's an introvert, he doesn't want to talk to people. You can't do that in Philadelphia, there's people everywhere. And so he spends as often as he can back in Virginia on his little estate in Monticello, watching slaves pick tobacco and inventing the swivel chair, like playing the violin by himself. He hates Philadelphia. Hamilton proposes, if we pass this financial plan, I will not push to put the capital in the north, which is where it probably should be, because that's where all of our money and commerce is. But let's put it in the south. And they find a spot between Virginia and Maryland, pretty close to Monticello, pretty close to Mount Vernon, where Washington lives. And they work out this agreement at Washington's dinner table one day. And that's why Washington, D.C. is where it is, because it was a concession to get the Hamilton financial plan passed. In 1793, France goes crazy. Yeah, what do you got, Shank?
Was it originally called Washington, D.C.?
No, it was called the Federal City,
Okay.
but it was pretty quickly named after him. Yeah. In 1793, France goes crazy. The French Revolution spills out beyond its borders. The Reign of Terror is guillotining Frenchmen in the streets, and France ended up going to war with Great Britain. Jefferson thought this was sweet. He loved it. Jefferson is always Team France. Jefferson is a little bit radical on stuff like this. He'd read his John Locke. He knows that if a government is too tyrannical, you have a responsibility to overthrow the government, right? Where in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one nation to dissolve the bonds. Right? Like, it's necessary. You got to do this every now and then. The Jefferson line, paraphrasing, it's like, the tree of liberty must from time to time be watered with the blood of tyrants and patriots. It's like every now and then you just need a good revolution. And he sees what's going on in France, and he's like, yeah, it's a pretty wild party over there. It's a great idea, and I love it. And so, like, again, I'm paraphrasing. So So it became very radical, and Jefferson and his followers wanted to support France's attempt at self-government. Washington and Hamilton says this is not a revolution, this is anarchy. This is the mob cutting off the heads of anybody that doesn't agree with the mob. This is anarchy, and they generally look over at England and they say, England's got a monarch, we don't love that, but they're not killing each other, and that's not nothing. Right? And so they gravitated towards England as the center of European power. Washington says, but in any case, this is not our fight, and we will be neutral on this. Jefferson thought that was a betrayal of all of our French allegiances. He says, but France came to our aid in our struggle against tyranny. We should be supporting France in their struggle over tyranny. And he's got a point. I mean, if it wasn't for the French, we'd be speaking English today. The international neutrality was negotiated by a guy named John Jay. John Jay is a really important founding father you don't know anything about. If you know anything about him, you might know that he is, one, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He hated and resigned as quickly as he could. And two, he is the author of the Jay Treaty. The Jay Treaty tried to negotiate the U.S.'s peace in the world by being neutral. Jefferson hated the Jay Treaty. A lot of people hated the Jay Treaty because it seemed like we were abandoning our previous allies because we were not going to pick a fight. The Federalist Party supported the economic plan of Hamilton and to a lesser extent Washington, and they supported the idea of the close ties with Britain. So the Federalists are Team England on this one. To Federalists, the idea of freedom and liberty was rooted in the idea of proper authority. Because the country is strong, it allows you to have the freedom of business. If the country was weak, if you had anarchy and the reign of terror, that does not allow you a lot of freedom. You have to keep your head down and your mouth shut a lot because the mob might get you. So for Federalists, deference to authority was the most important thing. The Democratic Republicans were skeptical of central authority. They said, I don't know if you remember this, Federalists, but we just fought a huge war about having too much power in the central government, and we don't want to do that again. Yeah, TJ. Yeah. As the political language got more and more heated, both sides said the other side was not a proper American. They had betrayed the principles of the American Revolution. And then let's get specific with it. Subpoint G. Angry with Hamilton's taxes, his excise tax on alcohol production, in particular whiskey, Pennsylvania farmers refused to pay the tax, blocked tax collection, and even led a full-on insurrection in Pennsylvania. Mobs in the streets, grabbing the tax collectors to tar and feather them. That's what the Sasquatch is in the middle of that picture. It's not a Sasquatch, that's a person that's been tarred and feathered. Hanging up banners that read, liberty or death. Okay, tarring and feathering is not in your notes. Let's spend 2 minutes on it. Today, when people hear tar and feathering, they think it sounds like an awful, awful torture because you are imagining petroleum tar, which to heat it to its boiling point, where it melts, where it becomes liquefied, will kill you, right? Or like scald you so much you wish you were dead.
Melt your skin off.
Melt your skin off. Liquid petroleum tar to its melting point. This was not petroleum tar. This was tree sap tar, and it had a much, much lower melting point. It wouldn't kill you. It would not be pleasant, and I wouldn't suggest it. But they would take a person, put them in basically like liquid tar, which was made out of tree sap. It would still be hot, but it's not like life-threateningly hot. And then pull a person out and throw feathers all over them. They would stick. It was a public embarrassment. It was a not insignificant embarrassment. If this happened to you, you would be picking feathers out of for a long time, but it wouldn't kill you. So
How'd you get that off?
one feather at a time, bud.
That was the whole point of it.
Yeah,
They wanted to make
it would be a public embarrassment and a very lingering nuisance.
people
yeah.
were tired of paying their taxes.
The Whiskey Rebellion in 1794 proved to Federalists. Federalists looked at this and said, like, aha, here's the mob mentality. Here's what happens when you don't have strong central control. They turn into riots in the streets and tax collecting getting tarred and feathered. This is why we have a strong central army. Hey, Washington, go do your thing. And Washington, the civilian, no longer the general, put on his uniform, mounted his horse, and led 13,000 troops into Pennsylvania to go put down the Whiskey Rebellion. It remains the first and only time that a president has led the army into battle, and threateningly to the Democratic Republicans, he led it against Americans. Subpoint H. Supporters of the French Revolution, critics of Washington administration, formed nearly 50 local clubs of the Democratic Republicans. They were called the Democratic Republican Societies. They came out the same year of the Reign of Terror. These societies argued that political liberty was not just the ability to vote. To have political freedom must be defended in daily life, a constant involvement in public affairs. You gotta be connected to the world. When you see P. Diddy in the t-shirt that says vote or die, which is totally not a threat, that's not enough. You have to be involved in the day-to-day business of public affairs. These Democratic Republican societies were debating clubs, they were political organizations, they would hold meetings in public venues. They also pretty much burned themselves out by 1795. But what they what they do was to organize the Democratic Republicans into a national organization at the grassroots level. And this has so much political value. It's exactly the opposite of what the Federalists are doing. The Federalists say, the grassroots are a mess. You have strong leadership at the top. That's the Federalist model. So the Federalists end up creating a smaller and smaller political party of elites, whereas the Democratic Republicans end up making a broader and broader party of the everyman. So they're quite divergent models. This will become politically super important in the election of 1796. In the election of 1796, John Adams becomes the president. Washington served 2 terms and then voluntarily hung up the sword and went home to Mount Vernon to be a gentleman farmer. Washington had imagined himself like the old Roman dictator Cincinnatus, to have done his time for the Republic and then to ride off to be a gentleman farmer in the hills. Washington thought that sounded awesome. Washington was also getting to be kind of an old man, and he was tired, and he just wanted to go home. He wanted to, at this point he was of a grandfatherly age, he had done his time, and he was ready to pass it on to the next generation. He has Hamilton write his amazing Washington's Farewell Address, which is far more brilliant than Washington could have ever written. Hamilton was brilliant at it because Hamilton had been writing Washington's letters for a long time through the Revolution. He knew his style, knew what he would say, and just had a habit of making him sound better. So when Washington asks him to write the Farewell Address, Hamilton just leans in and writes one of the early, beautiful pieces of just political prose. This is the way the Republic should be. Yeah.
How old was he when he served as president?
Washington?
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, he left in his 70s. And that was a pretty old man. And a guy that had lived, life expectancies are not as short as you think they are. They never really have them. Statistic skews your opinion on that. But he was done. He'd lived a long, hard life. So when it was time to retire, it was time to retire. And so John Adams becomes the president in 1796. It is hard to imagine a person more poorly suited for his time than John Adams in 1796. Here's a little life advice. Never follow a legend. And John Adams tried to follow the greatest president in American history. with the man that just wasn't up for the task. Adams's life had been a lawyer, a rabble-rouser, a fight-picker, a person with principled ideas he would die for. He was not in governing. He was not a man of compromise. He was temperamentally unsuited to be a governing leader. It was totally a mess. John Adams wins office with 71 electoral votes. Right behind him, right on his heels, is Thomas Jefferson, who becomes vice president. A little backstory on these guys. During the Revolution, John Adams was the loudest voice for the cause of liberty. He's the guy that advances the Declaration of Independence. It was John Adams who picked Jefferson to write it. Adams mentored Jefferson's early career. Jefferson was brilliant. Everybody knew it right away, but he was a retiring man. He was a poet. He was an introvert. He would rather sit in the back and write letters than ever be heard from speaking. He just really did not like the spotlight. And John Adams coached Jefferson into the public view. He basically said, here's how you give speeches. Here's the friendships you need to make. Here's how politics work. And Adams really coached Jefferson into being the statesman that he would become. By 1796, these guys no longer get along. They're in opposite political parties. Adams is a Federalist. Thomas Jefferson is a Democratic Republican. But the way the Constitution operated was that the overall winner of the Electoral College became president, and the second place winner became Jefferson. This was a close election in 1796. You can understand that the country had differing opinions on the way it should operate. Okay, Richard, you had a hand up. Yes. The way it should operate. Yeah, they don't get along very well anymore. The friendship is broken. The friendship is broken. And actually, Jefferson, as often as he can, he ditches out on Washington and hangs out in Monticello, which is kind of his thing. Anyway, so Jefferson wins the Electoral College. And right away, John Adams makes a mess of governing. He looks like he's totally the wrong guy. An example, we send a group off to France to go negotiate a new trade treaty. And our delegation goes off, and they go meet the French delegation. And the French delegation demands that before they will hear from the Americans that they pay a bribe. This was totally the business in Europe. They had, like, diplomacy was always like, before I sit down at the table, you put some cash under the table, and then we will sit, and then we'll negotiate. The bribery had, like, kind of happened for a long time. Americans, we're new at this game. We're not used to, like, international intrigue. And so they write a letter back to Washington. They're like, we think this looks like a bad deal. This looks like corruption. I'm not sure I'm in. They want a bribe before they'll even come down and talk to us. And they identify the three French diplomats by a code name. They call them Mr. X, Mr. Y, and Mr. Z. This gets leaked to the newspapers as the XYZ affair. And all of a sudden it looks like John Adams doesn't know how to do business with the rest of the world. It looks like, this rube from upstate New England, backwater of Massachusetts, doesn't know how the world works. John Adams, we didn't know how the world works, but all of a sudden he looks like the incompetent rube in this. Then we end up in what's known as the Quasi War. It's not an outright war, but we get into a shipping battle with France over islands in the Caribbean on how goods can flow through the Caribbean. We're not going to get too far into it, but John Adams ends up in an international dispute called the Quasi War. And then just to add fuel to the fire is Freeze Rebellion, where several tax protesters had gotten themselves arrested, thrown in jail, and then a guy named John Freeze led an armed rebellion to break them out of jail, and it kind of looks like John Adams doesn't know how to run a country. Then it gets worse. Adams faced so much criticism in the press that he says, I have had enough. If you keep criticizing the government so much so that we can't even govern, then you're basically making small-time, annoying treason all the time. And he signs, ill-advised. As much as I love John Adams, this was a huge mistake. He ill-advisedly signs two laws which we just jointly call together the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Alien and Sedition Acts are basically there to stop the Democratic Republican press from writing all of these press articles insulting the president. The Federalists say all you're doing is promoting rebellion, and that threatens freedom. 10 people were arrested, including a United States congressman and several newspaper editors. By the way, if you ever want to work out a way to get yourself the worst press possible, arrest a newspaper editor. And that will not go over with the other newspapers very well either. In opposition to the Alien and Sedition Acts, Madison and Jefferson each joint wrote new bills called the Virginia Resolution and the Kentucky Resolution, attacking the Sedition Act. And they said, you know what lawlessness really looks like? It looks like the government making laws against freedom of speech, protected in the Constitution. John Adams is probably kind of right. I mean, Jefferson was right. This was a mistake by Adams. He shouldn't have done it, but he did. And this sets the stage for the craziest election in early America, and maybe top 5 craziest elections of all time, the election of 1800. In 1800, Jefferson and Adams face off again. This was an era of honor culture where a person's reputation mattered a lot. A lot. It was the currency of business, was honor. And it would have been dishonorable for any politician to run for office. It would seem seedy and shady if somebody wanted to be a politician. It's very much of the idea that, like, the people should choose a representative, not the representative wanting to be chosen. And so John Adams, who like always wanted to be chosen, I mean totally, the guy just like screamed out for it. He takes the high road and does not run for office, says, if the people choose me, I will serve. Jefferson, who really does not like being the center of attention, really also wants to be president. But he can't run against him for a couple of reasons. One, he's his vice president. 2, that's his old friend and mentor. And 3, it's just unseemly. Gentlemen don't run for office. So Thomas Jefferson conducts a secret political campaign written in anonymous and pseudonymous letters to the editor, telling about all the awful things that John Adams has done as president, why he is a rascal and an incompetent leader, and basically floods the press secretly with all of the dirt and undersided stuff. Yeah.
Wait, so at this point, had no one really like actually ran for president?
Correct. It would have been inappropriate.
So when did that start happening?
Soon. It happens kind of slowly to do so. So Jefferson covertly and dirtily spreads trash about Adams and basically ruins his rep in the public eye to advance the Jeffersonian political career. We got to talk for a second about how presidents were elected back then. The Electoral College votes. The overall winner gets the president. The second place winner gets the vice president. Every member of the Electoral College had 2 votes. You could write down Bethy on both lines if you wanted to, but you probably wouldn't. You would probably say, like, Bethy would be a good president and Danielle would be a good president. So you'd write both of them down there. Yeah.
Isn't it kind of counterintuitive when you have 2 people who run against each other and have to work together?
So this is kind of the thing. This was not a successful... in 1796, this was not a successful president and vice president, because Adams is a Federalist and Jefferson is a Democratic Republican, and they don't get along. Imagine in 2016, if the overall vote getter of the Electoral College, Donald Trump, becomes president, and the second place winner, Hillary Clinton, becomes vice president. Like, you can just imagine this would not be a successful administration, right? I mean, maybe, but probably not. Yeah.
Wouldn't that kind of keep things from getting done, though?
Maybe. It might. And that's either good or bad, depending on your opinion on getting things done. Yeah, TJ?
So you
said the press was pretty harsh on Adams.
Yeah.
Like, would you say that would be like worse today with the media?
It was a very different era, and in a lot of ways, it's actually pretty similar in others. But yeah, journalists today are at least expected to appear impartial, and they weren't necessarily back then. So yeah.
Yeah, did John Adams ever figure out that Jefferson was sending you?
He always suspected it, but couldn't prove it until pretty late in their life. Yeah. Okay, so, sorry, we get this note here. Members of the Electoral College were authorized by the original Constitution to vote for 2 names for president, so everybody gets 2 names on it. But the drafters of the Constitution had never imagined a political party world where somebody like Jefferson, who's presiding over what is actually a national party that has grassroots organization and can, I don't want to use this term, but I'm going to use it, to rig the election. They can all get in cahoots about how the Electoral College will fill out their ballots. So, in 1800, Jefferson arranges that all of the Electoral College will meet together and that everybody's going to vote for Thomas Jefferson for president. And for vice president, they're going to choose a guy named Aaron Burr. Now, Aaron Burr was not a Virginian. He was basically a New Yorker by this point. It makes the Democratic Republicans look like a national party. For a while, Burr had actually been a Federalist, so it makes Jefferson again look like he's having a big tent. And he says, everybody's going to write Jefferson on the top line and Burr on the second line, except Fancy on yours. I need you to write Jefferson on both lines. And Fancy's like, oh, okay. Yeah, whatever. It's fine. And it goes to the Electoral College. The Electoral College casts their votes, and everybody votes Jefferson on the first line. And for some reason, Fancy also writes Burr on the second line. Now, whether that's because Fancy believed in Burr, or forgot the deal, or chickened out, we'll never know. But they end up, John Adams was irrelevant by this point. The Federalist Party had worked itself into being such a small political party that Adams was not going to win. Under any circumstances, Adams was not going to win. But the Democratic Republicans end up with a deadlocked ballot. There is no person that wins the Electoral College. All right, constitutional scholars, what happens if there is no majority winner out of the Electoral College? Who gets to vote next?
The House?
The House of Representatives. Good. So the House of Representatives goes and puts this thing up into a vote. Yes, TJ.
Wait, how would they have it done? Did they have an even amount of voters?
An even number of people voted for Jefferson as for Burr because Fancy didn't squander her second vote. She could have put anybody. She could have put the milkman on it. It didn't matter. But she just shouldn't have put Burr, but she put Burr for whatever reason. So it goes to the House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives votes, and they end up in a tie, and they can't settle either who's going to win this Jefferson and Burr thing. And they say, okay, well, this is the highest. House of Representatives has to vote. Let's vote again. Okay, everybody, vote again. Jefferson or Burr, and it's a tie again. And they do it again, and again, and again, and again. For 34 rounds of voting, they cannot pick the Jefferson and Burr election. And, okay, Burr should have said, like, guys, this is awesome. I'm supposed to be the vice president. This was the gig, you know? Burr should have done that. I'm not sure if it was actually constitutionally possible for him to do that, but it was certainly not personally possible for Burr to do that. Because while Jefferson didn't like being the center of attention, Burr loved it. He just ate it up. And the thought that he could get within a single vote of the presidency, that was better than anything. And so he just refused to let go of the election. So the plan was that somebody was supposed to throw away their vote for Jefferson and Burr, but they didn't. They ended up doing this over and over and over again. Now remember, there are in the House of Representatives a different political party. There is the Federalist Party. And the Federalist Party are led by whom? Hamilton, right. So Hamilton, who's not serving in the House, he's just the most important figure of this admittedly dwindling political party. Hang on, Fancy. They basically say, Hamilton, you're like a clever person. You know these guys, right? And Hamilton does know them. Hamilton served in the first cabinet with Jefferson. And the part we haven't really talked about here yet, but Hamilton and Burr almost grew up together. So Hamilton was born on that island in the Caribbean, but he immigrated to the United States, ended up in New York, ended up in Aaron Burr's world. They kind of had pretty similar paths. They were both orphans. They both trying to make their way in life. They would eventually work in the Revolution together. Burr would always want to, Hamilton always wanted to go fight. Burr always wanted to go work with Washington. And the opposite happened, that Burr was off being a war hero, and Hamilton always had to be like Washington's secretary. Drove him crazy. But they both wanted each other's jobs. And then, this isn't in the musical, but after the war, they actually worked in the same law office for a while. Where Hamilton would be like the writer of the legal briefs, and then they would hand it to Burr, who was much more like charming and a better speaker. So Burr would actually appear in court and he would talk to the jury and the judge, and they just won a snot load of cases. But they worked together, they knew each other. So they got to settle this thing with Burr and Jefferson, and they say, well, anyway, let's go see what the Federalists have to do. And they go and they ask Hamilton, and they say, what would you do here? If you could vote, you're not in the House, you don't get a vote, but if you could vote, you know these guys, what would you do? And Hamilton says, man, Jefferson is wrong about everything. I have fought with this man for decades. I mean, we deadlocked the cabinet. We would over on what the role of the bank is, what the role of taxes are, what the role of a standing army is. The whole are we going to be a country of traders or of growers? He says everything, Jefferson is wrong about everything. Burr, I've known Burr for a long time. We fought in the war together. I mean, we had a law practice together. We kind of grew up in the streets of New York together. I've known Burr my whole life. But he says, you know what else I know about Burr? Is that Aaron Burr cares mostly about Aaron Burr. And that he's always advanced his own political career. And you're seeing it right now. He's not supposed to be president, and he just won't let it go. He says, Jefferson's wrong about everything, but the man has opinions. He stands for something. In this election, I can't stand the man, but I'd vote for Jefferson every time over Burr. And it broke the deadlock. And on the 35th round of voting, Thomas Jefferson becomes president, Aaron Burr becomes vice president. Burr sees this as a total insult. He's like, Hamilton has driven me crazy for years. I always wanted this job in the army and I couldn't get it. And then, he got all the credit for winning law cases. I was the one arguing in the courts. Every time I turn around, Hamilton is in my face. And it's honor culture. And he says, Hamilton, I challenge you to a duel. And it's honor culture, and Hamilton has to accept. It would be dishonorable not to accept. The code of dueling is that the person challenged gets to choose the weapons. There were 3 main weapons at the time: knives, swords, or guns. The least lethal of all 3 were guns. Pistols of the day were not very accurate. People could stand pretty close to each other, square up right at them, and miss. I mean, it was totally possible.
Like in Star Wars.
Like in Star Wars. So it was very possible that could happen. The least lethal was pistols. You would choose pistols if you needed to honor, you needed to protect your honor, but you didn't actually want to die. And so Hamilton chooses pistols. When it's time, this is not how it's done in the musical, but the Coda Duello says the person challenged gets the first attack. Hamilton, there's the actual duel has somewhat of a disputed history. The Lin-Manuel Miranda version in the musical is kind of the predominant way it's told, but there are other versions of it. Generally, we think that Hamilton tried to, what they call throwing away the shot. He tried to raise his pistol up and shoot into the air. This would still protect the person's honor because they have accepted the duel, they have chosen the weapon, they have fought first. But they could do that and it would be over. The person, the challenger, right, Burr, wouldn't actually have to return the fire because the duel has been satisfied. They were both willing to die for it. They could both walk away with like clean reps. Hamilton raised the gun up over Burr's head and shot into the air. But pistols were wildly inaccurate. And that bullet, that slug, comes shooting out of the barrel and appears to hit a branch over Burr's head. And like leaves fall down in front of his face. And he's like, "What the what, dude? You chose pistols. You weren't trying to shoot me." And like lays out, squares out, and shoots Hamilton and kills him in the duel. Falls to the ground. Aaron Burr said that it was Hamilton who ruined his political career. That was not true. Aaron Burr was the Vice President of the United States with a bright future. That's hardly like a ruined career. This is what ruined Aaron Burr's career. Suddenly he becomes the villain who shoots the leader of a rival political party. Yeah.
So wouldn't that be, that's not a crime?
It is a crime. And most states had outlawed dueling. There's not a lot of people in New Jersey where this was done. Everything is legal in New Jersey. That's not true. But it was like, they're just going to let it happen. It's like when teachers allow you to chew gum in class. It's against the rules, but sometimes it's just going to happen, right? So there's also another side plot on this that Aaron Burr tried
I
to...
think it's a bit bigger than just
Yeah.
something like chewing gum.
I don't disagree. But honor culture, if somebody challenges your honor, you have to go stick up for yourself. By the way, this inspired the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, where now the Electoral College meets and votes for president and vice president separately on separate ballots. This means that there is no longer like two different political parties in the same branch, same executive branch, and is much more plausible in the political party era.